Sudan's military announced that it had retaken the Republican palace in Khartoum. This marks the last heavily guarded stronghold of rival paramilitary forces in the capital. The capture of the palace is seen as a symbolic victory for the Sudanese military in its fight against the Rapid Support Forces. However, it does not signal the end of the war. The RSF still controls areas in Sudan's western Darfur region and other parts of the country. Social media videos showed soldiers inside the palace, giving the date as the 21st day of Ramadan. The palace appeared to be partly in ruins, with soldiers stepping on broken tiles. Armed soldiers chanted, "God is the greatest." Sudan's information minister Khalid al-Issa confirmed the victory in a post on X, saying the flag is raised, the palace is back, and the journey continues until victory is complete. The Republican Palace is featured on Sudanese banknotes and postage stamps. Its fall represents another military gain for Sudan's armed forces. With the palace's retaking, the RSF has been largely driven out of Khartoum. RSF-linked politician Suleiman Sandal acknowledged the loss of the palace, calling it part of the ups and downs of history. The conflict has resulted in over 28,000 deaths, with millions displaced and severe food shortages. UNICEF condemned the looting of food aid meant for malnourished children. Sudan has been unstable since the removal of President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. A transition to democracy was interrupted by a 2021 military coup led by Burhan and Dagalo. The RSF and Sudan's military have fought each other since 2023. Both sides have been accused of human rights abuses during the conflict. However, both sides have denied these allegations. Let's hear what Sudanese army spokesman said.
الجمعة 21 مارس 2025 شعبنا الأبي الصامت في ملحمة بطولية خالدة توجت قواتنا اليوم نجاحاتها بمحاور الخرطوم، حيث تمكنت من سحق شراذم ميليشيا الدغل الإرهابية بمناطق وسط الخرطوم والسوق العربي ومباني القصر الجمهوري، رمز سيادة وعزة وكرامة الشعب السوداني.
Well, joining us to talk about the latest developments in Sudan and the wider implications is Charles Sinkala, who is an international relation consultant, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. Charles, thank you very much for being here. Before we dive into what's happened in the past couple of days, could you provide some more context to us as to this conflict and what the ramifications of it are, both politically but also the wider reaching African region as well?
Thank you very much for having me, and greetings to your viewers. It is quite unprecedented in the history of Africa, where we who are Africans has elected, to have civilian rule as apart from having a military rule, and we continue to have these conflicts of certain segments of society who prefers that they can take government by arms and ammunition. It is quite disappointing. And if you look at the devastating impact in terms of how many people are killed through these civil conflicts, it's one that is not desired. But, to the continent, that the peace that we celebrate, especially on the southern part of Africa, is something that has to be commended, and that is the peace that we would like to have the west part of Africa, the eastern part of Africa, as well as the northern part of Africa, the Maghreb, that any process at all, if you have to change government, has to go through the democratic process where an elected leader has to be chosen among the candidates representing the people. Yes, the dethroning of al-Bashir in 2019 has left in nothing but the destruction of the country, which has not even seen any signs of survival, even to an extent that the government lost the control of the palace, which is the national symbol of the Sudanese people. But we can see now the celebration in terms of regaining those the control that they lost, and they should condemn any militia that are against the government, and we hope that the government should find regional organization support and as well as international community support to make sure that the rule of law is restored in Sudan.
Yes, Charles, of course, Sudan's military have made gains in recent weeks, but the paramilitary forces do still have some ground in Sudan. How important is it that the military makes these gains in terms of the humanitarian impact that we're seeing in Sudan currently?
Yes, we can see some sense of hope as the Sudanese people were hopeless, to an extent that the government had lost control, and most of the militia had control most of the areas. As we speak now, most of the areas are still in control of the militian groups. But notwithstanding that, the government has made strides in terms of trying to regain control. But it is also important that the government of Sudan should make sure that this such an occurrence in terms of losing control. Governance is about the control of the people. It's about the control and offering peace and security for the citizen. It's about making sure that there's hope in the country. It's about punishing the lawbreakers. And if the lawbreakers, continue to take over some cities like what has happened, it becomes a lawless nation.
Yes, Charles, to bring an end to this discussion, of course, tens of thousands of deaths reported during this conflict. What needs to be done in Sudan, but also maybe with support of other nations, to make sure that death toll doesn't rise too much?
Conflict in the Sudan is a conflict in Nairobi. Conflict in Nairobi is a conflict in Nigeria. And conflict in Nigeria is a conflict in South Africa. I'm calling on all region organizations and bodies, including heads of states and government, that we have to look at the humanitarian crisis that are happening in the conflicts, especially on the continent, and the DRD in Sudan, which has had decades and decades of conflicts. Who can forget the split of the country between the South Sudan and Sudan? Those conflicts do not see any light to the end at the moment. Strategically, meetings through the organization, regional bodies, or the AU, the highest organ in the African community, including also the United Nations Security Council, should sit in terms of formulating lasting solutions to ensure that these conflicts are investigated and the perpetrators and the fueling of these conflicts are destroyed, so that such an occurrence can stop. But we can see that a lot of actors, non-state actors and including governments, are funding such conflicts for the benefit of their military mechanism that has been selling arms and ammunition, because they supply arms to these war-torn zones.
Charles Sinkala, thank you very much.